It's been a very strange winter for us in Canada so far because we didn't get our first snowfall till late December, which is really strange. It usually happens in late October, but we got it in late December this time. And then just a few weeks later, we had the worst blizzard of the last decade that shut down the city and its suburbs for 2 days. And just a few months prior to that, parts of Canada had temperatures that were actually higher than the Sahara, with Lytton, a small town in British Columbia, reaching daytime highs of 49.5 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than the average Rubel-Kali temperature. So what we're witnessing in Canada is being played out all across the world because, as we all know, climate change is destabilizing our weather patterns. It's causing floods, forest fires, record temperatures on both extremes of the Celsius scale and without warning. And we as human beings remain as mute sufferers. So no part of our planet is left untouched. Anthropogenic climate change has evolved into an existential threat. And the irony is that even though it affects all countries and regions, its impacts are unequal, disproportionately affecting those who are least responsible for it. And the drivers of climate change are very clearly now anthropogenic. Global greenhouse gas emissions have grown every year since the global financial crisis in 2009 at a rate of 1.5% annually, and stabilizing only briefly between 2014 and 2016. And this rise is directly attributable to developed nations due to robust growth in energy use, sadly, most of which continues to be with fossil fuels. So to keep the global temperature rise in this century below the target that was set out by the Paris Agreement on climate change, so that's 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the carbon budget that remains after deducting past emissions is between 150 and at most 1,050 gigatons of carbon dioxide. Now, at the start of this new decade, emissions needed to decline by 7.6% every year from 2020 to 2030. And yet we are nowhere near that. And with every passing year of missed targets, this window of opportunity to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is getting smaller and seems almost out of reach. And uncertainties, particularly around the future of technologies such as those for carbon capture and storage that are entirely driven by developed countries, do not augur well for the future. Now, the ramifications are tremendous, some visible, such as the irreverent weather patterns that I'd mentioned earlier, that our panelists have mentioned here today as well, and most happen out of sight because climate change has become the dominant driver of biodiversity changes since the last many decades. Human shifts in land and sea use, unsustainable food systems, exploitation of species, pollution, and combine that with climate change. These factors are drivers of global declines in all dimensions of biodiversity, from genetics to species to entire ecosystems, with ramifications for their stability and functioning. And the bulk of this direct consequence of the consumption patterns of developed economies. It is a direct consequence of the consumption of developed economies, and the resultant environmental degradation is mostly cited in the global south. But at the same time, we are now also feeling the effects of that in the global north as well.